this session we always consider this the most difficult one when we are very, very happy and we have to go back to another dialogue and the tough conversations, which normally we try to carry out to probe what's happening where and how it can help the audience to understand the dynamics there. Recent past में एक चीज जो बहुत ज्यादा समझ में आई पिछले 5 से 10 साल में कि क्लाइमेट रिस्क या सोशल रिस्क बिल्कुल एक बिजनेस रिस्क और फाइनेंशियल रिस्क की तरह है. अगर इसको हम अंडरस्टैंड नहीं करेंगे और इसको हम एड्रेस नहीं करेंगे तो हमारे बिजनेसेस not only we will have a issue with the business and the growth, but we will have a challenge of living and the livelihood. जो अभी recent floods पाकिस्तान ने suffer किए हैं, and if people have seen the predictions for or forecast for the next 5 years, we are anticipating and expecting the similar floods in next 3 years as well. So अगले 2-3 सालों में भी ये हमें नजर आ रहे हैं कि इस तरह की repetition होगी. And if the global warming goes up a little bit more, तो पाकिस्तान एक ऐसा कंट्री है जिस जो दुनिया के 30% ग्लेशियर्स जो हैं इसकी सराउंडिंग में है, and if they start melting, it's very difficult to really handle that kind of flow of water. But at the same time, we also see कि यही चीज जब अंटार्कटिका में हो रही है तो वहां पे एक नया ट्रेड राउट बन रहा है. There are other countries who are looking at that. If such a water is coming up and we are talking about scarcity, can we create an infrastructure where we can channelize that water? Maybe जहाँ पे हमारे desert areas हैं, जहाँ पे हमारे पास agriculture में ground water की कमी है, क्या ऐसी possibility है? So engineering is still working on that कि इस flow और quantum को किस तरह handle किया जा सकता है. That's just one example. So it could be one of a disaster, and if channelized better, it could be an opportunity. जैसे कि अंटार्कटिका में हमें नए trade routes नजर आने शुरू हो गए हैं इस वक्त, और शायद उसके ऊपर हमें नए conflicts भी मिलेंगे unfortunately. So meanwhile, while we are waiting for Nadia, I think I'll start with you. आपके दो gaps हैं, and that I loved about that. So you are representing ACCA globally as well, and you have got your own initiative, Plantive, which is working in line with what's happening in the climate side, sustainability, and you are very, very successful in putting together some large transactions in Pakistan. So giving that background, how you see the climate and business nexus right now, how it can create an opportunity, and if it's not managed as an opportunity, what risks we are talking about?
Thank you, Sajid. First of all, I would like to congratulate the entire team of Nutshell and Asfar in particular for bringing together everybody, or Peshawar mein, a place which is like home for me, and for many of us, we feel very much at home here, and bringing all of this audience here and getting us together. So, Sajid, from where you started, के जो climate है, and I'll be bilingual here, कि climate जो है वो एक risk भी है और एक opportunity भी है. So obviously, as businesses sort of grow, and they are kind of sort of working in many different parts of, if we just sort of remain within the geography of Pakistan, there are businesses from various sectors. There are businesses who are working all throughout the country. They would be vulnerable to lots of risks. These could be risks with regards to availability of materials, availability of resources, with regards to supply chain, logistics, etc., everything. So climate as a risk is a risk that impacts everyone and anyone and everyone. And that is why the planning for it must be done with a view that we need to be ready with regards to any kind of shock that comes in and any kind of disruption that could sort of come in. So just to sort of addressing it from the perspective of ACCA Global. So ACCA, having its presence in more than 180 countries, had realized fairly early on that addressing climate and sustainability is very important to address this and work with the policymakers, the businesses, large organizations, all the stakeholders, but also create a very robust ecosystem in terms of ensuring that the workforce and the people who are dealing with this risk, or to convert this risk into an opportunity, they are well aware of this and they have the equipped tools So in terms of all of this being embedded in the qualification, and also in terms of creating an ecosystem, working with different stakeholders, creating more awareness, etc. So, and also then in terms of setting the standards as well. So some of you, or perhaps most of you, may be aware of the International Sustainability Standards, which was set up by the IFRS Foundation. So ACCA had a huge role to play there. And also, most recently, last year, October, ACCA launched its first ever diploma in sustainability and is the leading organization to sort of do this. So again, there's a lot of work that had started much long ago, keeps on continuing. I'll come to the work that I undertake from my organization, Planative. We work in bringing in the nexus of decarbonization, technology, and finance. And this is really, really essential. And having worked with a lot of different industrial sectors, cement, infrastructure, power, energy, and many others, we knew that what are the challenges of the industry. And again, I and my team, we love to work in very difficult sort of areas where if there is something complex, we just get like, we really enjoy working on those sort of challenging sort of equations. So when the industry needs to address its decarbonization challenge, there is finance that is required. There's data analysis that is required. There's like an entire roadmap as to how we address is from the board level to bringing in comprehension for the management and for the leadership teams, and then all the way to operation solutions, and then work with the various stakeholders that may touch, say, one single industry. So we bring all of that together. Then finance, of course, is a very key part to that, because we need to have the right kind of finance available for it. And of course, Pakistan's banking sector is now very cognizant and is like has been extremely supportive in supporting the green ecosystem, decarbonization. But there was a time it was not very easy to explain to finance providers that if you're only dealing with typical industries like textile, sugar, steel, etc., to tell them that here we are, fund us because we are deploying energy efficient solutions, we are saving the energy cost, or we are saving the climate emissions. But yes, there is an upside for the business as well. So now I see that we've come a long way, and there is, while the risk is immense, there's a huge opportunity.
Thank you, Ayla. And I think I'll take this conversation to Fatma now. Fatma, Ayla has set a very good stage for us when she's talking about the transformation and the changes and the use of technology to enable the organization to expedite their greener journey. So you being working with a multiple organization in different capacities, including the technology, resource augmentation, the talent transformation, and managing their journeys. So how you see the nexus of the climate and business working together, and how Abacus is really helping the clients or the talent development to leverage the technology to expedite these green journeys.
Thank you very much, and Assalamu alaikum. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, very well, very well.
Okay. I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you to Asfar, Rabia, the Nutshell team. Also the flexibility, because I could not join in person due to unforeseen circumstances, and very excited to be part of this very critical discussion. From a perspective of, the relationship between technology and sustainability, Sajid, that you mentioned, and Ayla has also referred to very poignantly as well. You see, in my opinion, the age of AI is it's not just about building greener technology or using technology for a greener world. It's about building green technology towards building a greener world. Now, it's easier said than done. And there is a fundamental shift that organizations have to take in terms of their strategic mandate, the governance around it, the tools and the roadmaps that have to be in place. Because at the end of the day, the world of AI, IoT, cloud platforms is already here. As we say, the future is here. So how can we ensure that there are sustainable solutions which go in tandem with a world which is enabled by AI? Any organization, any institution, any government that does not adopt no longer remains relevant. And of course, sustainability becomes a question. So there is a great focus that should be made in terms of the talent readiness, of course, but also the framework. Because at the end of the day, AI, with its power, can focus on precision in agriculture, optimize logistics to reduce emissions. We can also look at smarter energy grids. So it's across the technology. It's not just a technology sector, but it's across sectors as well. So when you have this circular thought process where technology is accelerating sustainability, then sustainability will shape the tech design itself. I feel there are 5 elements, Sajid, if I may, that go into defining what are the models that need to be kept in mind as the new paradigm is put firmly at the center of strategic decision. So I talked about building green technology to building a greener world, but there are also the links between energy and efficiency. For example, data centers. Data centers have to be powered. But if there is power in terms of renewable sources and renewable energy sources which are powering the data centers, there can be a dynamic shift in terms of the load and also the carbon awareness. That's just one example. So AI can actually focus on reducing those emissions because of the life cycle on the focusing on emissions. And the trade-off does not need to be there. Innovation can also be in the center of ensuring that there are more efficient networks and also improving performance. The second element is the industry impact. As I mentioned, in my view, the telecom sector, banking, manufacturing, especially the textile and the cement industries, can be at the front runner of ensuring that AI and sustainable solutions are provided and extended. For example, in banking, Ayla also mentioned it, talking about green lending, ESG risk scoring, for example. Manufacturing can use predictive analytics to minimize the waste. The third element is, of course, government and inclusion, the regulation around it. And then how do you ensure that the readiness and the regulation does not subvert the journey towards becoming more eco-friendly and having this very strong partnership between AI tech solutions and sustainability, which will allow us to address climate resilience. One thing I would say as a conclusion, linking it up to Pakistan. So the green tech imperatives, that is focused. The current ministry is, the minister is focused on climate change initiatives as well. There's a lot of work that is being said. One of our fellow panelists is from the ministry as well. But looking at how Pakistan is the 5th most climate vulnerable country, where we have surging energy demand and exposure, the policy targets of 2030 of 30% renewable energy has to be put into place in terms of implementation. Then the new ESG disclosure mandates by SACP. So there's a great support that is driving this conversation. And from a market perspective, the total addressable market right now in sustainable software and services is around almost $1 billion just for Pakistan. This is not the overall global market. So the more we focus on AI, grid optimization, ESG scoring, the talent has to be ready towards making sure that is fundamentally within the organization thinking of a strategic move towards partnering AI-based tech solutions towards sustainable options. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatma. Thank you very much. I think that basically brings us back to the conversation we were having before lunch, the ecosystem. So right now we can see that there was a certain conversation that there are different actors in the ecosystem. If we can create a collaboration and incentivize everybody, we can create that ecosystem which can channelize the funding to the right project with the right kind of governance, like Ayla and Fatma both highlighted that that's one of an important area. The reporting, the talent side of it, and technology, everything putting together, that's create the end-to-end visibility how the projects are working. Or इसमें जो risks most of the time when we talk about the risk, which sometimes the bank or a financial institution is unable to understand, they cannot spend money or invest in those projects where the risk is not understandable, or data is not validated, or disclosures or reporting is not there. And this conversation brings me back to Umar Saab, Dolans. End-to-end visibility, circularity. I think Dolans is the one which working a lot on the circularity, how they are really consuming the recyclable materials, what they are doing in terms of the green gases, and how they are handling the energy efficient appliances. So Umar sir, my question is how we are handling the end of life, how we are talking about the electronic or e-waste which is being generated within the industry, and how we can monetize it, and how it's a risk for the climate as we speak, and what we can do, how that trash become a treasure for somebody.
Thank you, Sajid. Thank you for, first of all, having me on this panel, and thank you to everyone from Peshawar for the amazing hospitality since yesterday. It's great to be here. So we've been talking about sustainability since morning. There's been a number of conversations that have happened since we started the day. So I think one thing is very clear one thing is absolutely clear that it is an existential crisis. And if we all believe it's an existential crisis, I think that each one of us, whether it's on an individual level or at the corporate level or at the policy level, we have to understand what our responsibilities are. And unfortunately, and I'm trying to build up towards your question. Unfortunately, when I talk to a lot of people in the industry, most people actually don't understand what sustainability really means. It's a great buzzword. Everyone wants to talk about it, and when I ask them what you're doing about it, the sort of answers that I get is about a little bit of circularity, a little bit about energy saving, plantation, and that's where the conversations generally end. Unfortunately, when I ask the next question, is how much is your scope 3 contribution? And 99% of the times the question is what scope 3? Right? So my concern is that unless what we have been hearing for the longest time, that what you can't measure, you can't control. Unless we're able to understand the essence of sustainability and what is it that we're trying to control, we'll never get the right answers. Scope 3, for those of you who don't know, is your entire supply chain. It's how you source your materials, where you source them from, how you bring your materials into your factories, how you produce, and then how it gets to the consumer, how the consumer uses it, and then how they dispose it of, which is your question. End of life, right? So generally, globally, the statistics say that for most industries, almost 70% of their emissions are scope 3. Right? For our industry, which is the home appliances, the number is as high as 98%. So if I were to only focus on the circularity bit within my company or the energy conservation within my company, I'm only focusing on 2% of the problem, and the 98% remains unaddressed. So really, I think that the most important part in this entire thing is not just how you manufacture or how you recycle or reuse. Is first of all try and understand how you design products. How are your suppliers operating? How are you getting your materials into your factories? Are you importing? Are you buying local? What component of your parts or things are made in Pakistan? Because if you don't localize, if you're importing from thousands of miles away, your scope 3 goes up even higher, right? and then comes the consumer. So when I said 98% of our industry's emissions are scope 3, within that 98%, almost 70% is product and use, how the consumer uses it. And the calculation says that you've got to look at for the next 10 years at least, right? So if the consumer doesn't use a product the way it's designed to be used, it becomes part of my problem. So educating the consumer on how to use it. When I ask people what's a phantom load, no one knows what phantom load is. Right? A phantom load is if you don't switch off your television from a power supply, it's still using energy. You're wasting energy. So any appliance which has a PCB in it, or you have a digital display, if you're not using it and you're not switching it off, there is energy going in. And statistically speaking, in a household, anywhere between 5 to 10% is your phantom load. Most people don't know this. Right? So this is the level of education that needs to be done even before that circularity and end of life management comes in, because in Pakistan, particularly in our industry or even in the car industry, the end of life is very, very far away. You don't throw away things. In the West, you'll see refrigerators and washing machines lying on the footpath where someone just put it out there, or in the junkyards. Over here, there's such a massive secondary market that things continue to get used. But having said that, we are part of a very large global company. It's a Turkish company, which is the second largest home appliances company in the world now, Beko. So we've actually set up 4 plants around the world where we are actually bringing in products from our customers at the end of life and refurbishing them. So there's a plant in the UK. I visited that last week. There's one in Italy, one in Romania, and one in Turkey itself. So these 4 plants, we're actually bringing products back, repurposing them in terms of replacing the parts that need to get replaced, and bring them back into a position where they can be reused and give them a much, much longer life. So these are countries where this was a problem, so we've addressed that. In Pakistan right now, I think our focus is more on trying to make sure we actually design our products properly for the Pakistani market and looking at our circumstances. And we've actually made a very huge investment in setting up our own R&D capability in Pakistan. So we've got 2 R&D centers which have the entire design capability, one in Karachi, one in Islamabad at the NUST Technology Park. And now we're able to design every product that we sell in Pakistan, and therefore we can understand the local circumstances and design in everything that's needed. So the energy grid over here is very different from what it would be in the West. So if we use those products, they won't be as efficient as they would be when they're designed in Pakistan for Pakistan. So we're actually doing all of that. Fatma just talked about AI. So our R&D center in Islamabad is basically doing embedded softwares and AI and connected devices and connected homes. So it's a global R&D center. It's doing a lot of work on this side, where we're actually trying to pick up a lot of insights from the market and design them into our softwares, so they're able to manage our appliances in a manner where they're being used as efficiently as they can be. So rather than just telling the consumer how to do it, we're trying to use technology as much as possible. So as the number of connected devices and these appliances start increases, obviously this is going to have an impact on that.
So I think that's a great insight. The AI within the home appliances can help us to reduce. I'm not sure how much phantom load we can reduce, but definitely it can make it more efficient and make us more aware that what's going on that side. But you pick up that the global center of AI, right? So is it something which is in Pakistan and supporting the rest of the world?
Yeah.
Great.
For our company,
I think that's a great achievement and encouragement and endorsement for the talent in Pakistan, which is working globally.
So we've got almost now in our company about 100 engineers working only in R&D, 20 of which are working in our Islamabad R&D center and around 80 in Karachi. So we're not just doing AI, we're also doing structural designs, cooling circuitry, and everything else that's required to be done to design one of our products.
Thank you very much. I think Umar Sahab raised a couple of key concerns when we were talking about what is our contribution. Let's say when we talk about the climate change, we talk about the sustainability. So even a small contribution at houses to advocate and educate our own family and friends and within our circle of influence how to handle even the as small thing, the house appliances, home appliances, and just switch it off. So now if you multiply the number with the and with the days, and if we are talking about 10 to 15% of the house load is coming from the phantom load, so you can well imagine the financial incentive it has to really adopt that habit. Number two, how it can help us to really reduce the climate or carbon footprint in terms of the fossil fuel. So sometimes it's not someone else has to step in. Sometimes it's us, I, who has to step in and make that change. So I think
give
that
one
yeah.
more example on something like that. So the general understanding is that dishwashers use a lot of water. And I asked this question to someone last night, so it's very fresh in my mind. And the answer was, why don't you use it? The answer was, it uses a lot of water. The reality is that Pakistan is a water-stressed country. We're going to be running out of water very soon, despite all this flooding that we see. A dishwasher uses the number of dishes that go into a dishwasher. When you wash them under the tap, you use around 125 liters of water. You do the same dishes in a dishwasher, does it with 9.5 liters. So one dishwasher saves 100,000 liters of water per annum. Right? So again, unless at the household level we understand what my carbon footprint is for my household, I'm not going to start looking at these technologies that are out there.
Exactly.
Yeah?
No, very true. So now, if we can take one or two questions from the audience, yeah, please. But it has to be a question, not a comment, right? And you have to really address that.
My name is Zarak Khan Agra, and I am a student of policy from Lahore University of Management Science and Slums. One thing which I wanted to include and I wanted to ask, that is that you have talked about that our own households, they are not that much educated enough to basically focus on sustainability. But now as an organizations and the CEOs of different organizations are sitting here, so don't you think that we should basically adopt some degrowth strategy? The things which we have been doing, they have not been contributing to the sustainability of the world and the sustainability of the well-being of our societies. So can organization do any kind of CSRs to basically educate our people and to basically help them unlearn the habits and the things which they have been doing and that have been contributing to the harmfulness of our environment and ultimately resulting in the crumbling of the society. So are there any kind of perspective or any mindset from the side of an organization to basically educate their end users? For example, if you are enabling some kind of AI thing.
So, yeah, I got the question.
I'll answer that. So that's so thank you. It's a very, very important question that you asked. So I think you're absolutely right. And I think if you look at the last 150 years, I think that's where the whole damage has happened. While humanity has made massive progress, it's been at the cost of damaging the environment. And therefore, it's a man-made crisis. And no one from outside is going to come and solve it. We've got to solve it ourselves. And you're absolutely right. But where I disagree with you is it's not about degrowth. It's not about degrowth. We've got to continue to progress, but we need to do it very consciously and with a clear mind on what we're doing. So at Dolans, what we've done is that we revisited our brand purpose. What it used to be in the past was things like connected devices or lifestyle products, and we've redefined it and we call it our brand purpose today is progress today, preserve tomorrow. Now, whatever we do is part of our business strategy, and everything that we do in our organization is driven by this one tagline, which is progress today, preserve tomorrow. So if we design a product, that's how we will do it. That is got to help the consumer progress in their lives today, while making sure that the product that they use is the most sustainable in its category, right? When we do our marketing or branding, or all our advertising campaigns will have some sort of a subliminal or clear message out there about sustainability. We ran a very massive campaign and we allocated a very large part of our marketing budget last year and this year as well, where we're doing this campaign around building better habits at home. A lot of those ads you will be seeing on social media might not even have our name on it, but we're actually doing this as exactly what you're asking me, where we're trying to help consumers understand how they can build better habits at home. And what I keep telling people is, I think we, as individuals, we need to actually adopt mindful living habits, which is एहसास से भरपूर जिंदगी. जब तक हम हर इंडिविजुअल अपनी जिंदगी में ये एहसास नहीं पैदा करेगा कि एनवायरनमेंट को बचाना क्यों जरूरी है, एंड ये कोई बाहर से आके किसी ने नहीं करना, मुझे करना है. अगर मैं किसी और का इंतजार करता रहूंगा तो कभी भी नहीं होगा.
I like coming back to you, and in the morning we were discussing, and even in the first session there was a discussion around having the right kind of project to attract the right kind of funding, and you picked up earlier as well. Now Pakistan, we have got a mindset that we've been victim, and there's a certain losses which we have gone through with the floods and these climate induced disaster, and we should be rescued by others, and somebody should come and put up that money. And the climate finance is one of a thing which is allocated for last 2-3 years for Pakistan, but we are not seeing it coming to Pakistan. So where's the gap?
Thank you, Sajid. First of all, nobody will help us if we don't help ourselves. So that's the most important thing. I think gap exists ये करता है कि जब हम when we say that there's so much capital out there, ये COP26 पे एक बहुत बड़ी announcement हुई थी $130 trillion की, and I mean nobody's actually seen that aggregate of $130 trillion. That's a huge amount. और बहुत सारे दुनिया में फंड्स भी क्रिएट हो गए सस्टेनेबल इन्वेस्टमेंट्स के लिए, टू इन्वेस्ट इन डिकार्बनाइजेशन, क्लाइमेट, एक्सेट्रा एक्सेट्रा एक्सेट्रा. But then, obviously, when it comes to that, where will that capital flow? Capital will flow where there is transparency, where there is a really good project pipeline. By project pipeline, meaning कि आपका जो project है, चाहे किसी भी industry का है, that should be creating some value and it should be feasible, और उसका जो risks जो हैं वो addressed हो. And I can give you one example. So, first of all, just to sort of say that the capital that needs to come in, yes, that can come in. इसमें बहुत सारे players हैं. Financial sector plays a huge role by creating instruments. फिर उसके बाद जो industry है, and I'm sure यहाँ पे बहुत सारे business के लोग भी and from people from various in industries would be representing. They need to create structures के उनकी industry में जो specific कोई अगर whether it's a project for expansion, any capital allocation that is made, या कोई energy efficient machinery install हो रही है, or for that matter clean energy, solar install करें. Pakistan में this solar boom that happened wasn't for the love of climate, to be honest. It was because there was less cost. The grid was failing us in terms of very expensive energy price. उसके अलावा चंद साल पहले हम देखते थे जब energy इतनी enough नहीं होती थी, intermittency भी होती थी, issues भी होते थे, the export industry couldn't sort of meet their targets, etc. All of those things. So when solar came in, of course, that was reducing the cost. That was then also making the industries resilient. Transparency is a huge issue as well. But projects are ठीक structure. I'm part of another initiative, and I can talk about that example. I'm co-founder of a company called Infraelectric. What we do is we energize the BTS systems for the telecom sector. What we do is we raise funds from the market. We invest our own funds as well. और हम लोग जो distributed जो telecom का network है, जहाँ पे बहुत सारे diesel generators लगे हुए थे या वो ग्रिड से एनर्जी लेते थे, we go and deploy our solutions which are of course reducing that challenge with regards to the availability of power, but actually reducing the energy cost, operational cost of the telecom by 60 to 70%. Absolute no-brainer for then the financial institution to come in and say, yes, we want to invest. Just last week, we launched our initiative for launching a 3 billion rupees sukuk. This is where the financial sector has come and supported us because they understand the risk is addressed, but it's a huge opportunity for them as well. And we are working in collaborative partnership with them. Just want to add one more point to that. That solution is also powered by the digital solutions, by AI as well. Predictability of how the energy will be used. If all these things come in place, you have a wonderful solution where it is win-win for everybody. And I think एक मैं छोटा सा point address करूंगी. फातिमा ने शुरू में mention किया AI and data centers के ऊपर. जो ग्लोबल प्रोजेक्शंस हैं कि बाय 2030 30% जो दुनिया की एनर्जी है वो यूज होगी एआई और डेटा सेंटर्स के लिए. सो हमें एनर्जी चाहिए भी है, पर साथ साथ हम देखें कि जब तक renewable sources or cleaner sources, by the way nuclear is also clean, हमारे पास वो robustness नहीं आती. We see कि हम जो एनर्जी किसी और से सोर्स से ले रहे हैं उसमें हम डिकार्बनाइजेशन कैसे कर रहे हैं, कौन कौन सी इंटरवेंशंस कर रहे हैं ताकि वहां पे emissions कम हो. There are also tools like carbon credits that can sort of fund. Then just how one structures the project provides more clarity, resilience, and tells the world that these are the kind of governance structure around it. हम दुनिया का बेहतरीन से बेहतरीन climate funding we can attract in Pakistan.
No, thank you, Ayla. I think that's very important to understand. It's not that somebody is out there sitting with the money and waiting for you to come and get it. We have to be eligible for that. That's a very simple thing. And there's a way to do that. And in Pakistan, people have done it. So it's not that we don't know, we can't do it. It's just that we have to bring all the actors together. Like Nutshell is a great forum today to bring everybody together to talk about it. And this is the opportunity to create those network and collaboration. Fatma, I'll bring one question which is very close to my heart, and I'm sure Ayla also is very much vested in that question. Ethics. We are talking about climate, we are talking about AI, we are talking about a lot of unknown areas. And we have seen the data biases creating a more inequalities in the certain society, or particularly in Europe, we have already seen that. And the countries like who are already climate vulnerable, and they have a pressure to have the data center so they can deploy the AI there. So where we don't have a renewable energy. So there are a lot of trade-offs which are working. So how the ethics play its role in terms of balancing the AI data center in a resource constrained or a climate vulnerable countries?
Thank you very much. And that's a very important aspect, which I believe not just in Pakistan, around the world, companies and countries are deliberating upon. Ethical use of AI tools, or the ethical framework or governance framework, I would say AI governance framework, is absolutely essential. But in order for that to work, there has to be a basis of building models which not only enable transparency, but also look at an equitable approach towards access to these tools across the board. It is not just limited to certain segments of society or decision makers. That's extremely important. Two, जो regulators हैं now, for example, as Abacus, we are working across 30 countries, across 4 continents, and we're building AI-based solutions, technology solutions with our partners on the African continent, in the US, in the Middle East as well. And each environment and each maturity cycle of these economies is very different. We have to take that into account, but there are standards. Ayla also spoke about it, and Umar Saab also referred to them as well, of understanding what those standards are and how can they fundamentally be dovetailed into the technology solutions, AI-based solutions, which will be then running the data. At the end of the day, what we're doing is shifting at least the transactional, operational, the precision, analyzing the data.
And the right kind of data, the biases and integrity.
Or to the AI tool. And the right kind. So it has to be the input. The input has to be credible data, accessibility, credible data, ताकि वो जो information analyze होती है, जो machine आपको output देती है in terms of the reporting, enables greater productivity, greater efficiency, and sound decision making for sustainability. It's not an easy road, but what happens is it starts in terms of the architecture. Now, for example, one of the telecoms that we are working with on the African continent in Kenya, and how we've developed their marketplace, in terms of linking the telecom to the fintech, to the retail, and obviously the banking industry. Fundamentally, it also has to take into account the regulatory environment, but it also has to take into account the transparency and ethical use of how the transactions are being made and how responsible are the suppliers and the vendors which are connected to the marketplace. There's a fundamental standard, which is the layers or the architecture layers that are being put, the digital layers that are being designed have to take into account the sustainability aspect, not only in terms of compliance and mitigating the risk, but also taking into account what is the vulnerability of that country towards climate change. What is the vulnerability towards the ecosystem that is available or it is around them? So I feel that it is our responsibility to be aware of who we are doing business with, quite frankly speaking.
Definitely.
It's about making sure that the due diligence of the partners or the consortiums that build the ecosystem of AI. So when we work with companies in the US or the African continent or anywhere in the world, we say, what problem are we trying to solve? And is this on the line of sustainable growth? Is this value adding? And are they looking at compliance and mitigating the risk? The third element I would say, and most important, is the talent that is required to develop future forward solutions. उसमें ये है कि knowledge, it's not just about coding. Coding is also becoming a thing of the past already, because AI, ChatGPT, these learning LLMs are making that obsolete very quickly as well. But is the talent in Pakistan ready for it? I'm very proud to say कि हमारा global delivery center पाकिस्तान में है. जो हम काम कर रहे हैं, जो हम दुनिया पे लेके जा रहे हैं ये AI tools, whether it is in the telecom or the banking or the textile or manufacturing industry, it's being designed, thought of, brainstormed in Pakistan. So we have the talent. We just need to make sure that there is awareness towards governance, towards compliance, and towards mitigating the risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatma. Thank you very much. I think that brings us to the close of this session. I would definitely like to thank Omar Saab explaining something which is happening in our everyday life, and Ayla really bringing it home that what does it mean when we are talking about the climate finance, what does it take, and what the governance and the standards require. And Fatma really bringing that if we are talking about climate, it's not possible without having a right kind of governance, technology, and the talent to put together. And I think here we are seeing a lot of examples. You want to add something? Yeah, please.
मैं एक चीज कहना चाहूंगी कि देखिए हम सब जो अपने पर्सपेक्टिव से देखते हैं ना, अगर थोड़ा सा इकोसिस्टम को बाहर समझें और देखें कि हाउ आवर रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी एज इंडिविजुअल और ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस इज. Yesterday, a very renowned climate activist and a leader in this space, she passed away. Jane Goodall is her name. उसने बहुत decades पहले एक बात की थी कि the future, the biggest danger of our future is apathy, which is lack of empathy, which means that we are concerned only about ourselves but not about others or our larger ecosystem. अगर हम इस lens से देखना शुरू कर दें, जो कि climate, she said it mainly from the climate and from the preservation of nature diversity and all of that. But अगर यही lens जो हमारे बहुत सारे global challenges हैं उसको भी देखें, we must not have apathy, जो कि आज हमारा सबसे बड़ा मसला है.
I think हमने बहुत अरसे से ना ये पूछना छोड़ दिया मेरा क्या रोल है और मेरी क्या रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है. हम बहुत अरसे से कह रहे हैं मेरा क्या राइट है और दूसरे की क्या ऑब्लिगेशन है. So I think when we start changing the question, we will start looking at the climate as another opportunity. We have seen our nation coming together when there is a crisis. We don't have to wait climate becoming such a big crisis. It's already there. We have seen the floods and we are going to see more coming in the coming year. We don't have to wait for that. But every individual action we're going to take in our own life and in our circle of influence is our obligation and responsibility. Nobody's else's responsibility. It's my responsibility. We have to start with I, we, us, and make sure that it's always pointed towards my role and accountability towards me. And that's where we will see the climate and business, and we will see the nexus, how it's going to shape the future for all of us together. but it will require concentrated effort by everyone towards the common goal. So thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Fatma. Thank you very much.